Hey guys, the next few videos are going to move pretty quickly. They're going to be pretty short. These are all review concepts from last year. So you should get these right away, and they should make sense to you pretty quickly as they're things that we've already done. So the first thing we're going to look at is writing equivalent rational numbers. Now part of this we looked at in the other video, the last video that we did, where we were changing the fractions into the decimals. I'll briefly review that again, and then we'll talk about changing decimals back into fractions as well. So again, just a reminder, to change fractions into decimals, all I do is I take the numerator, I divide it by the denominator. So if I have a 2 over 7, I take the 2, I divide it by 7, I can write it out like this, do my division, and get my answer. However, when I'm changing a decimal to a fraction, here's where I'm going to have to remember place value. I'm going to have to use my place value to determine the denominator. So basically what I'm doing is I read the number out loud, and that will tell me the two numbers that I need to know. I'm going to write the numbers. So for example, this is negative 0.625, and what you'll notice is actually on these, I've forgotten the negative sign. This is going to be the number on the top of it's going to become my numerator. My denominator will come when I read the fraction. So if I were to read this properly using my place value, if you remember your place values, we have tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So I would read this as 625 thousandths. So the two numbers I hear are my 625, which is right here, thousandths, I hear thousand, so it's going to go over 1,000. The other rule that I use, the quick one, is basically count how many decimal places you have. That's how many zeros are going to be behind the 1 on the bottom. So there's 3 decimal places, that means it's over 1,000. If there were 2 decimal places, it would be over 100. If there was 1, it'd be over 10. That's a quick way to remember it. But the other thing you can do is just read your decimal out loud and write it in fraction form. So in fraction form, it would be 625 over 1,000. What I noticed about this fraction is it's not in its simplest form. We can reduce it. So then I would reduce it, and these are actually both divisible by 25. If you do that, you wind up with 5/8, and then you'll see I just added in the negative because I almost forgot to add in that negative sign. So you want to watch your negative signs. The difference between last year and this year is that we're going to start throwing negatives in as we do these things as well, negatives and positive numbers. So we're going to be dealing with a little more than we dealt with last year. So we're just going to do some examples now of converting. I only threw in 2 fractions because we already went over this. So again, divide the top by the bottom, and notice that it's negative so that my answer needs to be negative. So how many times will 10 go into 7? So we set it up, add my decimal here, my decimal goes in the same place as my answer. 10 won't go into 70, it'll go into 7. It won't go to 7, it'll go into 70 7 times. So my answer here is negative 0.7, and I have a terminating decimal. Over here, you'll notice we have a mixed number. So what I would do is I would just ignore this 1 for right now. We're going to put it back in when we get our answer, but let's just look at the fraction and figure out what the fraction is as a decimal. So I have 13 twentieths. So what I want to know is how many times does 20 go into 13. So add my decimal, I just throw in a few zeros because I don't know how many I need right away. My decimal goes in the same place. 20 goes into 130 6 times, gives me 120. 10, bring down my 0. I really only needed 2 zeros because 20 will go into 100 5 times, which is even. So 13 twentieths is 0.65. However, I also have a whole number here. The whole number is just going to go on the other side of the decimal, and don't forget to keep the negative there. So keep the negative 1 in front of the decimal, then take the rest of the decimal and put it next to it. So negative 1 and 13 twentieths is the same as negative 1 and 65 100ths. All right, so that's all we have to do there. Just make sure that you're paying attention to your place value and you're putting things in the right places. So here, again, I read it. I have 125 thousandths. So what I hear is I have 125. These numbers go on top, and then I heard thousandths. So 1,000 goes on the bottom, and this is a negative number. So make sure you keep your negative there. The other thing we can do is count how many places we have. 1, 2, 3. So I should have 3 zeros, and I do. This, however, I notice is not in lowest terms. So we're going to want to reduce it. These are both divisible by 125, actually. 125 will go into itself once, and it will go into 1,000 8 times. So I have negative 1/8. And the important thing to remember when writing a negative fraction, I can write the negative with my numerator. I can write it with my denominator. Or I can write it in front of it like this. Those are all ways that I can write the same thing. So don't get confused. It doesn't matter where that negative is. It means the fraction is negative. All right, don't let that throw you off. So here I notice I have 4 place values, which means I'm going to need 4 zeros on the number underneath. I know the top number is going to be the digits I see. If I were to read this out loud, I would say I have 3,125 10,000ths. So 10,000ths is the other number I hear. There's 4 zeros. There are 4 digits here, so I know I'm good. And again, we're going to want to reduce this because it is a very large number. And when we reduce this, we'll actually find that it reduces 5/16. Yes, I cheated there and used the calculator. That was a lot to try and do in my head. I will give you a quick tutorial later on. I'm not sure where it'll be placed in the videos on how to use your calculator as well, because it has a lot of neat functions that will help you out if you know how to use it properly. So that is this in its simplest form. So the thing we want to remember with the fractions is after we write it this way, we need to reduce it. And reducing it means we just find our greatest common factor and we divide it down to make it even. Divide the top and the bottom by the same factor, you have an equivalent fraction. Here you'll notice I have a whole number and a fraction. So this means I'm going to wind up with either an improper fraction or a mixed number. I would just write it as a mixed number. I have 2 whole and I have 8/10. I hear 8 and I hear a 10. And actually 8/10, that one I can do in my head, both of those are divisible by 2, reduces to 4/5. So I have 2 and 4/5. So all you have to do is remember your place value and you'll set it up just fine. Again, if you have questions, you know where to ask them. I'll see you guys tomorrow.